Alicia, good evening. The sun is just set on Durban. We've had 1,000 delegates from 100 countries and about a dozen African leaders, presidents or prime ministers, that is, at this conference. It was much anticipated. A lot of heavy concepts to be discussed and debated, a lot of ideas to be shared on how to grow the continent's economy and national economies. So just to go back to your question on what we've seen so far, we've had a session on the role and responsibilities of leaders in an age of disruption. Technology is moving so fast, and there were some debates in that session as to whether or not leaders are doing the right things to keep up with the pace of or evolution of technology, because ultimately that would determine the readiness for African and national economies to grow. A session that's currently underway now that is seen to be quite popular is unemployment and the unemployed and unemployable. And what that is basically addressing, with incidentally with the National Planning Minister, Jeff Radebe, also one of the speakers, it talks about whether or not Africans are producing individuals which are ready to go into the workforce, just given the skills that are required, the criteria that's required to actually go ahead and develop the country, the continent and countries. We're sure to get more info on exactly what came out of that session in a short while, but it seems to be quite popular at that moment. Now, Alicia, you asked me a question about the Finance Minister, Malusi Gigaba. Well, look, that conversation with a veteran journalist, Adrian Monk, I believe. He's with the World Economic Forum. He's a veteran journalist at CBS and at other international news agencies. He has a very anticipated conversations with Malusi Gigaba in a short while. Of course, many people here are seeing what this new Minister of Finance does in terms of posturing himself to the investment community and to observers. Undoubtedly, the terms inclusive growth and radical economic transformation is likely to come up. We just spoke to analysts before this, asking them whether or not clarity on those terms would affect discussions or even drive discussions at this World Economic Forum. So it'll be interesting to see what the minister's approach is on those two concepts, what his take is on being prudent and keeping fiscal consolidation intact in South Africa, and what his plans are to actually spend, and if indeed he spend, with the ratings agencies watching to see whether or not we are prudent enough.
Devan, speaking of ratings agencies, I mean, what do you get as a general sentiment on the ground when it comes to how credible these ratings agencies are across the African personnel? We hear that this was something that was to be discussed. Maybe tell us, what are the common worries when it comes to the ratings agencies throughout the African countries?
Well, you know, as far as those that oppose rating agencies are concerned, many point to the example of the 2008 financial crisis, saying that ratings agencies basically work for the Western big banks. They didn't predict the crisis that happened with the American banks in 2008. How credible can they be? But the argument from many of the analysts who beg leaders to watch out for the ratings agencies, they say that these agencies basically inform whether or not investors should put their money in a particular country. And as you would know, sovereigns actually pay ratings agencies to give them that rating. So it's very important, according to analysts we've spoken to here, that rating that we get from these rating agencies is significant because it does determine the direction of funds and investments investors take. Now, Malusi Gigaba, as he stepped in after that swiping cabinet reshuffle, we've seen ratings agencies downgrade us into sub-investment grade, and that might just hurt the cost of borrowing for South Africa. But really, we're waiting out to see whether Moody's does the same thing. Now, it's arguable that these downgrades were imminent, irrespective of whether or not Malusi Gigaba took the position of finance minister. But it is going to be important, it is going to be significant what the third ratings agency does for South Africa in the coming months. We believe it's around mid-year. Fitch has downgraded us into junk status. Moody's downgrading us into junk status. But that is our international foreign debt. What becomes very significant significant with ratings agencies is whether or not our local rand-denominated debt gets downgraded, because that's where the pinch comes in, and that's where investors start getting a bit wary. So we yet to see another downgrade on our rand-denominated debt. Fitch has given us one. We yet to see whether or not it comes from the other two ratings agencies. So ideally, that's the significance of these agencies, because they play a massive role in how we are perceived internationally.
Devan, just a very quick one there before I wrap you up, before you give us that conversation with the minister. Earlier on when we started the interview, you spoke about ideas and solutions that have come about throughout today's discussions. In general now, how will Africa benefit from this summit? Is this not just another talk shop that falls short on implementation?
I think if you look at the types of people that are here and the caliber of people, they share ideas. I mean, just this morning I went on a excursion with the logistics company, state-owned logistics company, Transnet. We went through the entire port area, the CEO, Siyabonga Gama, showing us the pivotal role that Transnet plays in moving cargo in and out of ports and transporting it through the various parts of South Africa. That's an ecosystem. That's a network that infiltrates into communities. And Siyabonga Gama telling us that it is those communities that they pass through where they can have a significant impact in uplifting. So, I mean, if you get those sort of ideas being shared, something useful can really come out of it. We speak about the Operation Pakisa, the oceans economy. Transnet once again showing us that if that's executed correctly, we can get more fishermen on board, we can get more fishing communities on board and start creating jobs. So to answer your question, if the ideas flow correctly and they are implemented and taken seriously, I can't see this being as a total waste of time in terms of a talk shop. I think those ideas are very important.
Thank you so much. That is a reporter on the scene, Devan Murugan, live to us from Durban at the WEF Summit. We will be bringing you live visuals from there as the new Minister of Finance, Minister Malusi Gigaba, is of course about to have a conversation with certain journalists. We'll bring you those live visuals right here on News Today.